Okay, I'm going to start off by stating three things. Now, just over a week ago, I had my wedding, and it was meant to be a really happy weekend. But just 2 days before the wedding, somebody I know messaged me and told me that his teenage son had lost his battle with cancer. And it was just really sad. Now, I now know 5 people who've passed away from cancer. 4 of them in their 30s and 40s, plus this teenager. And that's not even counting relatives or friends who've passed away at an older age. But it really started to alarm me when I noticed more and more people who were still very young passing away from cancer. And in the last year, I've also seen 4 other people get cancer, again, very earlier on in their 40s. So I wanted to make this video because I wanted friends of mine to know that they can actually control their cancer risk and lower it, okay? That's the main reason. And then the second point I wanted to bring up is that I'm well aware that anyone who's been through cancer, it's a very traumatic experience, and anyone who's lost anyone to cancer, they will be in a lot of pain. But they should know that they are actually at increased risk of getting cancer if they've had it before, or if they share the same genetics, because their genetics might make them more predisposed to certain carcinogens. So it pays to be aware of what actually causes cancer. And the last point I want to make is that I am not a doctor and I am not into medical research, but I do know how to read a study. And I've done more and more research ever since I started noticing that more and more of my friends have been getting cancer. So the key points that I'm going to be bringing up today in this video, I'm going to put in subtitles in the video so that other people can Google and research the stuff themselves, and also the links of studies that I'm going to talk about, and also a very prominent professor I'm going to talk about. I'll put in the links in the video description below. Okay, so if you Google something called the Warburg effect, named after the scientist who discovered it 100 years ago, he discovered that cancer cells feed off glucose, okay? And glucose is basically from carbohydrates, okay? And all of our cells use glucose when it's available. But cancer cells have a real affinity to glucose more than normal cells, because they rely mainly on a metabolic pathway called aerobic glycolysis, okay? Now, glycolysis can be anaerobic or aerobic, and cancer cells use glucose and turn it into lactate and use that as a fuel. So when a person eats a lot of carbohydrates, especially sugar, it is like throwing fuel on a fire. So I can go over the study with you. The study name of one of the studies, okay, there are many actually, okay, the Warburg effect, how does it benefit cancer cells, okay, and you can search for the title, or you can search for the PMID, which is the code on PubMed, and that's 26778478. Okay, let's go over the abstract. Cancer cells rewire their metabolism to promote growth, survival, proliferation, and long-term maintenance. The common feature of this altered metabolism is increased glucose uptake and fermentation of glucose to lactate. This phenomenon is observed even in the presence of completely functioning mitochondria, and together is known as the Warburg effect. Okay, so that's basically the Warburg effect, all right? So all you really need to know is that cancer cells use glucose as the main fuel source, all right? Now, they've also, if you Google, can cancer cells use ketones, then you will find that ketones are a really bad source of fuel for cancer cells and will inhibit cancer cell growth. And basically, ketones or ketone bodies are a byproduct of, well, if you do not eat carbohydrates at all, okay, basically what is known as a ketogenic diet, or a version of it called the carnivore diet, which is all meat and eggs, and you limit the amount of carbohydrates you eat, as little as possible, then your body goes into what is called ketosis, and it starts using fat as a fuel source instead, and it produces ketones as fuel for all the cells instead of glucose. Okay, now the body can generate a small amount of glucose via gluconeogenesis, but that is literally all used up by the brain, because the brain needs glucose, some glucose for fuel, okay, at least 30%. But then the body basically produces a large amount of ketones, and there are studies on mice which have shown that ketones inhibits cancer growth because it literally starves the cancer cells. Okay, so this is another study. Ketone supplementation decreases tumor cell viability and prolongs survival of mice with metastatic cancer. All right. And I'm going to put the link for that study in the video description as well. Okay, so again, all you need to know is that if you do not eat any carbohydrates, then your body switches to using ketones for fuel, and that starves cancer cells, all right? Now, they did the study on mice because it is much, much harder. Also, there are ethical reasons of putting a person on just an almost zero carbohydrate diet over a long period of time. Okay, although now there are many people who have been eating a ketogenic diet and a carnivore diet over a long period of time, and not only do they not have health problems, they have really good health outcomes and have reversed a lot of their chronic disease issues. In fact, if you Google the history of the ketogenic diet, then you will find that it is actually over 100 years old, and it was very effective at reversing epilepsy in children. But then they stopped that practice because pharmaceutical companies came up with anti-epileptic drugs, and then they put the kids on those drugs instead. So there's a professor, Thomas Seyfried, who is working very hard on conclusively proving the Warburg effect in humans and showing that cancer is a metabolic disease, okay, which is caused by mainly because people have been eating way too much sugar and processed foods. Okay, so the two main ingredients in processed foods which is causing an increase in cancer, and cancer rates have skyrocketed. So in the US, cancer rates for young people are up by over 200%, and for older people above 70 is up by 400%. Okay, compared to data in from the late 1970s. The reason why the cancer rates have gone up so much is just because of increased processed food consumption. Okay, and the main ingredients that causes increase in cancer is sugar, which again I've mentioned is the perfect fuel for cancer cells, and also vegetable oils or seed oils. Okay, things like canola oil, soybean oil, corn oil, sunflower oil. Okay, they are extracted under very, very high pressure, and they have chemicals added to them like hexane, and are bleached, so which completely alters the structure of the oil so that it is no longer a type of oil which can really fit into the cell membrane of the cells, and they cause oxidation of the cells and inflammation of the cells. Okay, so over a long period of time, that sort of inflammation, because inflammation is a long-term inflammation is a cause of cancer. They would just increase cancer risk. Now, you might be wondering why only, well, Thomas Seyfried is doing the research, but why isn't the pharmaceutical industry and the medical industry pouring huge amounts of money into this type of research, which on low carbohydrate diets to find out a cure for cancer? And the reason is because not only is there no money in that, okay, it would actually absolutely devastate the revenue of pharmaceutical companies, okay? Now, a lot of people don't know this because they don't really think about it, but pharmaceutical companies are the only companies who profit off there being more sick people, all right? Now, over the years, I've obviously taken a lot of medications, like ibuprofen for if I was in pain. When I had depression, I took antidepressants. So there are medications which have helped extend human life, okay? So, I mean, basically everyone's taken antibiotics at one point or another. But ever since more and more people have gone sick from chronic diseases, pharmaceutical companies have profited more and more by having more and more sick people over long periods of time. And what is causing chronic diseases are basically lifestyle problems that cause dysfunction in the way the body operates, and that's called metabolic dysfunction, okay, at the cellular level, inside the mitochondria. And that's what Thomas Seyfried is basically trying to prove. And a lot of it comes to eating processed foods, okay? Ultra processed food. You go into the supermarkets and most of the supermarkets are full of processed food, okay? So processed foods and fast foods now make up 70% of the diet in the US, and that's why the cancer rates have gone up so much. And the UK is one of the highest consumers of processed foods as well, ultra processed foods, all right? And that's why cancer rates in England have gone up so much. Now, some people argue that's also due to chemicals that we're using, and that's completely true as well. But the reason why a lot of people don't want to shift the blame to ultra processed foods is because of this picture, okay? Now this picture is basically the top 10 food companies and all their food products. And they make up pretty much half the food supply in the US, all right? So 10 food companies control half of everything that Americans eat. And globally, they control a huge amount, a large percentage of what people eat these days, right? So we're talking about the really big companies like Coca-Cola and Nestle, etc. And they lobby politicians in the US to come up with policies which benefit them, okay? So if you look at the work of this guy, Casey Means, he used to be a lobbyist for Coca-Cola on Washington Hill. And he knows all the insider information of how processed food companies and pharmaceutical companies operate. And he used to make payments to people who did nutrition and physiology research. He used to make payments to politicians. And he has, I'm sure he's backed up all the data and has a record of it. So when he makes claims, he can't be sued, okay? But he's been on Dr. Phil, he's even been on the Tucker Carlson show and given very, very detailed information about who paid who. So for example, like Cadbury's, the company who makes chocolate, paid $100 million apparently to the American Diabetes Association, okay? The American Diabetes Association is meant to lower the rate of diabetes. So why are they taking money from a company who makes products full of sugar, which is the main cause of diabetes, for example, all right? So basically, I just want my friends to know that they can just lower their cancer rate risk if they don't eat carbohydrates. And I know even if people know this information, very few people are going to follow through with it. Because I know plenty of friends who know alcohol is bad and they just binge drink on weekends and Everyone knows smoking is bad, and even I was a smoker, and for many years, and smokers know the risk, but they do it still because most people are after pleasure in life, and they don't really look after their health until one day they get sick. But for people who are health conscious, or people who have cancer in their family, they should know that they are able to control their cancer risk by just not eating carbohydrates and basically starving cancer cells, okay, and giving their body enough time to basically kill the cancer cells themselves, because we actually produce cancer cells daily, but our immune system will seek them out and then kill them. Old people are only more prone to cancer because their immune system is weaker. Okay. Also, like I've posted this before, anyone that does a fast longer than 72 hours will trigger very, very deep autophagy, which is basically the body trying to recycle its cells to produce protein for existing healthy cells. And then the immune system will seek out and destroy cancer cells, okay? So I'm going to do a video in future about exactly how we got here, why there's so much chronic disease, and the timeline under which basically researchers for nutrition and physiology have basically taken money from big food companies and from pharmaceutical companies to deliberately produce research which is misleading, so that they can then justify and pay off politicians to get policies which benefit big food and big pharmaceutical companies, and to increase the amount of processed food consumption rather than lower it. All right. So, for like as Casey Means I brought up, mentioned, 90% of the food subsidies in the U.S. Is actually allocated towards processed food sales. All right. So the U.S. government gives food stamps for people who need help with their food purchases, but those food stamps are pretty much all used for ultra processed foods and not whole foods. Okay. So if they really wanted to lower the amount of disease in the U.S., they can easily do it. They just tax ultra processed foods and make it more expensive, and then subsidize whole foods, okay, healthy foods, and then people will naturally not be as sick. And the UK government should do this as well, even though the UK health system, the NHS, is a free system, almost free. The UK government doesn't do anything about this. So just want everyone to be aware of it, and if you're interested in this type of topic, then I'm going to make more videos on it in future, because I just know way too many people who've gotten cancer over the years. All right, cheers.